We are going live right now. We'll be starting exactly at 11, so that gives us like 2 minutes if you want to mute for a bit. We are live currently. I'm going to post the link to the live stream for the panelists to see if you wanted to share it on social media, you can, Twitter included, not just Facebook if you don't want to. And
all right, yeah, I see the live feed up on the Facebook.
Great.
Sorry, got a few people hopping on.
That's wonderful. All right. All the beautiful people coming this way. All right. I'm going to go ahead and start. Because this will be recorded in perpetuity and available for folks to view later at any time from our Facebook page. But yeah, let's just go ahead and jump in. You know, we have a limited amount of time. So hello, everyone. Hello and welcome to the inaugural Community Research Expo. We are so excited that you have decided to come and join us for this moment, to see this work that we're about to showcase. My name is Jessica Bellamy, and Josh Poe and I founded the Root Cause Research Center earlier this year. I think it's probably fair to say that neither of us really expected the sheer volume of work and the sheer volume of just achieved milestones that we were challenged to reach this year with all of the different things that have happened. But we have had the absolute privilege to work with 7 remarkable and determined individuals: Marlisha Woods, Woody Pryor, Missy Wilson, Catrice Gill, Shamika Shaw, Shannon Floyd, and Whitney Major. Yes, yes. Over 6 months ago, these brilliant and insightful leaders accepted an invitation to gain some new skills or learn some new skills so that we could investigate some systems of oppression that had deeply impacted them, their peers, their loved ones. And Josh and I want to extend our sincerest and warmest gratitude to this group of folks that are here right now, that are going to be showcased for their work, their insights, their talents, their brilliance. Because every single moment that we've spent being in this work with you all, sharing this time, pushing and working for 6 months of grind, you know, every single one has been just an incredible, immeasurable honor for us to participate in, and so much a pleasure for us to be a part of. So I want to thank you for you all just joining this program, being a part of this program. We also want to thank you for persisting to be in this program despite a global pandemic, despite medical emergencies, despite compounding crises, despite the violence from the state, despite the resurgence of trauma, despite, and maybe a little bit motivated by, a national uprising for racial justice. We are sharing this moment together. We have built this platform together, and it could not be what it is now, which is astounding, if it wasn't for you all. Josh and I also want to clarify that it is near impossible to do this kind of work without some type of healing or restorative practice. So we want to thank S.T.E.P.S, ST.E.P.S is one of RCRC's board members, and they would hold us every single week at a weekly healing session, just to help us recenter and to get through a lot of our tears, our fears, our stresses. And you have to realize to be on this stage, to do this work, to investigate, to question, it takes extreme courage. It takes extreme courage to even hold this space. And so we thank ST.E.P.S for holding us in those moments. We also want to thank RCRC Associate Shelton McElroy. We want to thank him for being a project facilitator and mentor throughout this process. We want to thank editors, Nubia Bennett and Austin Smith, who were helping us make final edits on the reports, which folks will have by tomorrow morning. We want to thank our sponsors who supported us with their time, talent, and treasure. With a special thanks to Resist and Inspire for being the presenting sponsors of the Louisville Eviction Lab cohort. With a special thanks for Metro United Way for being the presenting sponsors of the Racial Wealth Gap cohort. And with a special thanks to Curtis Creative, to Rhythm Science Sound, and to Taunt Louisville, who without their help and their assistance, this moment would not be as elevated as it is right now. Thank you for investing in us. Taunt Louisville will also be featuring the work of all 7 of these folks and ourselves from the Community Research Expo. This flagship program has produced 5 projects, each project centering community perspectives with an anti-oppression lens. All of you who are attending now, whether or not you're here in this Zoom virtual space or if you're watching from Facebook, we thank you for your presence. We thank you for investing your interest and time in us today. And we want to let you know that you all will get first access. By being here today, you will be the first to see these presentations in their full form. And tomorrow we will be releasing all 5 reports, all 5 presentations, bonus materials, which will include story maps, motion graphics, all sorts of elements, even extended interviews with the community researchers themselves. All of that will be released tomorrow. If you go to our website at www.rootcauseresearch.org/CRE2020, you'll be able to access all this content and just dive deep and spend time marinating it as much as we have enjoyed putting it together for you. This is the fruit of our labors, and we are so excited that you are a part of this with us. If you should feel so moved by what you see today, by what you may read tomorrow, by anything about this presentation, this webinar, feel free. On our website, we do have a little donate button, and you can help support us for next year's program. If you're joining us from Facebook, there will be a 20-second delay, but for everyone who's watching now, we open up the space if you would like to message in the chat, comments as we move forward, and questions. We ask that you can hold your questions until after all the presentations are done. But if you have comments that can lift us up, that can energize us to let us know how you're feeling, how you're thinking, we'd love to hear them. We would love to hear them. If you're posting on Facebook, we will be reposting that in the chat on this webinar so that we can share it with the CRs that are here with us in this moment. If you're sharing any content that is on social media, feel free to use that hashtag CRE2020, just so that we can look back to see things and see that activity later, but also like let people know about this event, because this is a pretty unique happening right now, especially for our city and our region really of the country. This is about to be a very interesting space. And because of that, we invite you also to lean into any discomfort that you may feel, because when we start to experience those types of feelings, it's actually it's a notification that you have entered into a growth zone. And being in that growth zone may feel uncomfortable, but it may allow you to change maybe some operating assumptions or anything that might be not aligning with maybe some core values that you may possess. We also invite you to respect this space. We've all worked so hard to get to this moment. This is a pilot program, the center stage of what Root Cause Research Center is all about. And we have lovingly and painstakingly put this content together. And we are so happy to share it with you, but we would like you also to share it with the same reverence as we do. And finally, we invite you to analyze privilege in any moment and opportunity that you have, to think about power structures, to think about operating systems that exist. We invite you to investigate those. This is a part of a conversation, a longer conversation that we'd like to have with individuals not only attending this webinar right now, but that exist in this city, that exist in this country and beyond. These are conversations that need to happen so that we can all get to an opportunity where we can all be thriving in our lives. And so this is how this happens. I think we've hit all the notes that I have for the opening remarks. Let's go ahead and kick some stuff off. I pass it to you, Jared.
All right, everybody can see the screen share all right? All right, let's get into it.
So Marlisha is a dedicated visual arts educator, an active professional member of the National Arts Education Association, as well as an accomplished mixed media artist. Her work reaches beyond cultural and societal barriers, and her practice centers art as an essential component of public health and wellness. She graduated cum laude from Sullivan College of Technology and Design and studied sociology at Indiana University, where she holds a BGS. Working with her has been incredible. She is so organized, focused, and such a exacting person. Her influence was just massive in this work. It was incredible, and we're so honored to work with her.
Yeah, and I think with Marlisha, I think things happen collectively, and I think collectively in this city, a lot of people have kind of been hitting on a real similar topic area at the same time, where you have a lot of people that have sort of lived inside this Louisville nonprofit complex for a long time, and things that maybe we talk about in private, we're starting to talk about in public. And I think with Marlisha, that's been her process through this incubator. But through talking to her, we spent a lot of time talking one-on-one and developed like a really great relationship, probably someone I'm going to be friends with for a long time.
In the city of Louisville, I found that there's this misconception that our compassionate city is very diverse, and when you drive around, you'll see brown and black faces oftentimes on murals. Murals integrated into our everyday society. They're on the side of buildings, and so at a glance, it does appear that there's no racial tension, there's no issues with disenfranchisement. I started asking questions like, who's creating this art? Where's this art coming from? Who's funding it? And I found that oftentimes the art that is displayed is not created by the subject matter. And so my question is, who gets to tell the story? Who gets to hold narratives hostage? And who gets to create these barriers? The gatekeepers. How impressionable and vulnerable are we in the face of a story? Many stories matter. Stories have been used to dispossess and malign, but stories can also be used to empower and to humanize. When we reject the single story, we realize that there is never a single story about any place. We regain a kind of paradise. Adiche. I am an artist. I'm connected to many artists, visual and performing artists. Today, I would like to talk about Louisville, Kentucky's public art scene. I would like to talk about the interplay of public art and public health. So, when you travel around the city of Louisville, Kentucky, and you travel to East Louisville, or maybe even downtown in the business district, you'll notice that there are curated murals. But when you go to west of 9th to be exact, you'll notice in West Louisville that artists are creating all of the time. There's plenty of art, but that art is not curated. It's graffiti, it's all types of artwork that's considered street art, where there is no investment or little investment, juxtaposed to East Louisville. And downtown, you would say, well, why? You know, maybe there's certain artists that reside in certain neighborhoods, or maybe organizations that are based in certain neighborhoods. But what I'm finding, that's not the case. Art is weaponized, and it's used to hold stories and narratives to give this facade that there is really no issue of race and class in Louisville, Kentucky. There's this idea that art is this creative, right? You're just very free form, and there's no rules to it. It's a discipline without any type of parameters. And as an artist, I can say that's not the case. Every discipline has a standard, and I think the standard should be raised. We should start holding people accountable for telling stories or misrepresenting, disenfranchising. We're talking about the racial wealth gap. How does that affect health? Ask yourself, what do you need to stay healthy? The core of that is finances, right? Can you pay a copay without finances? I don't think so. And so when there's paid projects, paid contracts in the city of Louisville, and only particular people get that particular pay, then you have an entire group of people that are now receiving lower wages, lower access to public health. There are curators that are blocked out of boardroom meetings. There are galleries that you'll never see listed in any type of brochure. There are artists, performing and visual, that have so much to give in terms of not just their gift, their innate ability to provide a service that is needed in the community, but they have the abilities to transform. We're talking about transformational change here.
I'm Dr. Monica UNSELD. I'm a trained biologist and trained in biology and public health. I currently work for the Greater Louisville Project as their Director of Community Engagement, because something I've been doing for over a decade is environmental justice advocacy work. I also just founded a group called Data for Justice, so that's going to hopefully be launching here soon. So that's kind of who I am. It's kind of scattered.
Do you believe that there are barriers within the arts community to access opportunities, information, and equal pay among Black and brown artists, entrepreneurs, or business owners?
Well, I will say, I'm not very familiar with the arts community since I'm a scientist. However, as an observer, just think about how in school when we'd go to art museums, you learn the Renaissance paintings, we learned that style. Like that was what was considered art, right? Not an African mask. It was something by a painter in Florence, Italy. It was Leonardo da Vinci. Those were the things that we looked at, the sculpture of, David, Michelangelo's work. We didn't hear about anything that we did. They called us our art artifacts, and they stuck them in history museums because they were just things that someone dug up and found and stole.
And so when you say minority, what does that really mean? That doesn't necessarily mean we're talking about racially identified minorities. We could be talking about women, which is very important, but oftentimes numbers get skewed when you throw in for diversity and inclusion. Just, have a whole bunch of white females hold space, and all of a sudden it's like diverse, And so I wanted to make sure that this research really speaks to the topic at hand, which is the racial wealth gap. I'm just coming from the art lens. And so the question, do you believe that racially identified minorities are often misrepresented through narratives told for them instead of by them?
Absolutely. One of my dear friends, Richard Moore, who's a leader in the environmental justice movement, he always says, if you're not at the table, you're on the table. And one thing he always does, he always reminds us that we need to take control of the narrative. I do community advocacy work. I was trained in the HEMES principles, which means it's not top-down organizing, it's bottom-up. The community speaks for itself. Everyone is an expert in their own experience, and the community has a right to self-determination. So when I go in to a meeting and they have me the only Black person in the room, and they want to talk about a project in Shawnee Park, I will say to them, where are the people who live around Shawnee Park? Why are you asking me here to speak on this? Because I think not only did they create a narrative for us that denies us our humanity, right? We're not allowed to be emotional. If if we speak up, we're too aggressive. You know, we're the strong Black woman, but we can't be sad. But then Black men are thugs and violent. And, oh, you're so articulate. Oh, you know, you're pretty for being Black. And, you know, that hairstyle is trendy. When like, no, actually, these hairstyles are centuries years old. You know, like they were around on the continent of Africa before the white people got there. But that whole narrative that they've created around us that boxed us in, we have to say, no, we are experts in our experience. And in academia, I've been known to light fires. So, you know how they like have these degrees in diversity and inclusion and degrees in social justice. And I said, do not send me a white, cis, hetero, you know, non-disabled, you know, person with a degree in social justice. Let me go talk to a 6-year-old Black boy, because he's going to know more.
When you're driving, most people, I would gather, they're not really thinking like, who's behind that paintbrush? What's really going on? How many dollars? You just see it for what it is. Some people take selfies and get out the car real quick. And, you know, it's one of those cool, trendy, urban environment. Just want to, you know, be engaged with the art to a point. But all disciplines have accountability, art included. Have you noticed a lot of Black and brown faces painted in Louisville?
Yeah, I have, and I think it's intentional. I think it's deliberate to control the narrative so that they can attract corporations to move here. They can attract hipsters to move in and do their Airbnbs and all of that. And I think when you talk about investment, art is a public health intervention. If you invest in art, if you allow people, because me being a scientist, not knowing the art word, I had always viewed art as an extension of humanity, of your emotions, you know, your limbic system. Like this is where your brain is processing what it's like to be of the human species. The research is clear. If you invest in things like art, crime and violence go down. Instead, this city continues to choose to invest in policing and criminalization. They are choosing to continue to invest in the plantation. And it's very obvious what parts of the city metro government favors and which parts they see as a nuisance, right? Because you can drive on Brownsboro Road, west to east, and you can see things change. There's more trees as you go east, like everything, you know, the temperature drops. It's very clear. And we have to remember that this is deliberate. It's not accidental. This is a genocide, like control the narrative. And if they say, oh, graffiti has a negative connotation, well, according to standards set by white supremacists. But we don't have to use their standards. And just like I said, there were no African masks. There may not be them. They may be in the history museum, but that's still our art. So it's like, no, this is our art. And it's just as worthy as receiving funding and artwork. And I would love to see more accountability from the funders here in Louisville, especially after all of those Black Lives Matter statements came out. To see more accountability, not just in funding, but in their executive leadership. I've noticed that when they want to bring in Black people, they bring in Black people like me who have degrees. And I said, I'm gonna go get someone who lives west of 9th. I have degrees because I had the opportunities and I beat the system. Never assume someone could not get a PhD. Never. So there's still that control of like who is accepted into these meetings, who are the friendly Negroes that will agree with us. But I truly believe that art is a vital public health intervention, especially as we want to heal from COVID. We want to heal from the Breonna Taylor case. If Louisville is going to get past this, we need our artists to speak up, and we need our Black children to say, here's some pencil, here's some paint, here's some crayons, go at it and speak your truth, because they're not going to listen to us they're not going to bring us to the room. So when we're going to put it on the wall. That's how I feel. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. With that being said, you just said the last part, the quote, if they will not bring us in the room, we'll just have to put it on the wall. That wall, whether it's funded or not.
Shannon Floyd is a dynamic leader with a strong commitment to helping organizations and individuals excel. She works as a professional mediator at Resolve Restorative Practices in Louisville. She has a master's in social work and is passionate about fighting against implicit bias, discriminatory practices, and inequities in employment and labor. As a community researcher at the Root Cause Research Center, she is working on a project that addresses issues within the racial wealth gap. She's so good at just perfectly articulating exactly what she means in the moment and identifying problems very quickly and early on. That it's just fluid working with her. It's always fluid working with her because she knows her own mind. She knows what the work needs to be because she is an expert of this issue because she's been impacted by it from multiple different fronts for her entire career. Yeah.
Seeing her actually work on that with that kind of passion and energy and feel like, you know, and I think that it gives people some semblance of control over the situation, but it's also important to acknowledge that there's a lot of trauma that comes into that too. And so I, you know, kind of watching her work through all those issues. Louisville can be a really violent place for someone like Shannon. Shannon is brilliant. She's a brilliant facilitator, you know, very well credentialed, brilliant mediator, has all these skills, but yet has been kept out of a professional, you know, place of recognition that she probably would have attained in another city that wasn't so oppressive, right?
Take a look at your hiring practices. Look at your employment applications. Ban discriminatory and biased questions. If you can pretty much guess my race through my name or by where I live, then restrict those kinds of questions from the application in itself, because that's where implicit bias comes in at. Through a talent recruiter. Talent recruiters, human resource departments are the modern day slave patrols for enterprise, because every applicant goes through the screening process of this talent recruiter or human resources or what have you with clear racial identifiers as questions on a pre-employment application. Why is that? Despite the largest economic expansion in U.S. history, not to mention 4 centuries since the first enslaved Africans arrived in 1619, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, followed by Voting Rights and Fair Housing Acts of the 60s, America's labor market continued to be plagued with racial disparities that persist with Black Americans. This is identifying and examining bias and discriminatory hiring practices in the labor market. Specific points from my research brief will be highlighted, spotlighting the region's largest employers: United Parcel Service, Jefferson County Public Schools, Humana Incorporated, Norton Healthcare, and Ford Motor Company, hereafter referred to as the Big Five. Employment applications from the Big Five were assessed for bias and discriminatory questions, guided by one prevailing question: does this determine an applicant's ability to perform job responsibilities? Various questions are being asked of the applicant that are inherently discriminatory. Questions about race, gender, questions about addresses, social security numbers. Why is that information relevant to a pre-employment application? Why are you collecting racial demographic information if it's not even required on the application? On every application of the Big Five, it's voluntary. So if it's voluntary, why ask it in the first place? Every applicant would be assigned a number, not by name, no address. You don't need to know their social security number. You don't need to know their age nor birth date. Just an applicant number, a little bit about their work history. Basically, that's it for a pre-employment application. That's all that's necessary. The human resource officials of the Big Five were directly contacted, asking specific questions about racial, demographical information about their workforces. Surprisingly, but not surprised, little to no response was received. Like, none of the specific questions that were asked were answered. The irony of all of this are the diversity and inclusion statements and initiatives of the Big Five. There are socioeconomic disparities and issues because of the system, not because of a group of people. The Big Five have the power to do something different if they choose to. This is the time. This is the season to do something different. Be brave, be bold, be courageous. Because what we're doing is only working for a particular demographic. There's no doubt that the subject of race and economics is one of the most sensitive, or is the most sensitive issue or subject to tackle. If you're really committed to diversity and inclusion, lead everybody else, lead enterprise.
About your position as a hiring manager and you talking with the talent recruiter. Was she white, female, Hispanic?
Recruiter?
Yes.
The recruiter is a white female.
She's a white female. What's the race of the applicant that you requested that her application be pulled?
She was African American.
She was African American. And she couldn't say anything beyond, I don't think she has a good personality.
Yes.
Based on a phone interview?
A 10-minute phone interview.
A 10-minute phone interview. And this person came recommended, highly recommended by one of your employees.
Correct. Highest educated person in our department. More than the system director.
Okay. Now, you know you're going to have to talk about that.
So that when the manager position was open for 2 years,
okay,
my system director never once approached me and said, hey, why don't you apply for it? I'll help you. I'll teach you what you need to know. None of that happened.
Okay.
In 2 years.
Okay.
Open position.
Okay, although you had the highest level of education and experience.
Correct.
Wow.
I'm more qualified than all of these people.
Wow.
And I'm still making the same as this co-manager who has no degree. Our salaries were the same.
Wow. Wow.
I'm the only African American there, all Caucasian.
What would make an African American woman in a management position, an upper management level position, leave a position making close to 6 figures?
In a nutshell, the atmosphere,
okay,
hostile.
Okay.
And it was too much stress. Like I said, the manager, or my director, was not open to anything.
Sure.
That conversation we had about race relations and all that, you know, it fell on deaf ears, and it's just the culmination of things. And I didn't trust my leader anymore.
Sure. Sure.
Neither her nor the system director. And again, he never stepped in and did anything or said anything. This is after conversations with HR as well. It was too much in person.
Sure.
To handle. I had asked HR that, does anybody in Norton's have 50 direct reports, 40 to 50 direct reports?
Sure.
Nobody had 40 to 50 direct reports at Norton Healthcare.
So, I mean, I heard you when you said before that you had the largest team. Mm-hmm. Out of the 100, you had the largest team. You had 3 co-managers. One was terminated. So they doubled up on your team as far as numbers. So nobody within Norton Healthcare has, and one of the few African-American managers in an upper level management position, you were the only one to have that many direct reports.
Right. And it's evident that they have a problem recruiting African Americans. Because all African Americans, if they would open it up and show you, most of the African Americans have the housekeeping jobs at Norton Healthcare.
Sure.
They're in housekeeping or PCA, those type of lower level positions.
Okay.
There's just not a lot in management positions, supervisory positions, unless you happen to know somebody that knows somebody. So it's not really based on your education experience. If you know somebody, you can climb up the ladder real quick at Norton Healthcare if you're in with those people.
I guess the final question is, do you believe, had you stayed with your former employer, that
no. So I'll let you finish your question, but I'm certain that the answer will be no.
Well, the question is, do you believe if you stayed with your former employer that you would have been promoted to an upper level management position?
No, and one of the, and I'll tell you the reason why I say no. One of the reasons why I left and decided to pursue external career opportunities was because over the last 3 years, I've had the discussion in mid-year reviews, end-of-year reviews about where my next steps would be. Will I be promoted to a senior professional? What that looks like? What is different about me and the work that I do versus somebody else, and why I'm not being promoted?
Wow.
And you know what the answer to that was?
What was it?
Crickets.
Wow.
Crickets.
Wow.
And mind you, I have a bachelor's degree, I have a master's degree, and at this point, I'm doing the work, so I have the experience.
Sure.
But you can't explain to me why I can't be promoted to a senior versus other people that are on my team, and other people that are in the department that may be on other teams, with the nature that of the work that I do.
Sure. I'm
cross-functional, and other people on the team only have one specific responsibility, which is investigation.
Wow.
Mind you, I'm managing a discrepancy review process for background checks. I do reporting and data analytics. I also do case investigation and also help to manage the engagement team for the department. So keeping associates engaged, keeping them wanting to be here, doing the fun stuff at work, keeping folks level-headed and trying to provide some monotony in the regular day-to-day office work, all of that, doing all of that. And you can't explain to me why I can't be promoted. So that was my reason for looking outside. So again, hands down, I know for a fact that it would have either taken years or it would have taken me going to some other area to be promoted into a leadership role.
In all of my years of working there, never once did I have a Black manager or manager of color. All 20 plus years, upper management was always, I never saw anybody that looked like me in upper management in all of my years there. The people that reported to me, for whatever reason, when it was time for the annual merit increases, they would meet with my boss. And I never quite understood it. It's like, well, wait a minute. If it's time for merit increases, why aren't they meeting with me? Why am I not doing their merit increases? So that would mean that I would have access to their financial records. I began to say, now I see why. But then eventually that manager that I reported to left, and I took over his office, and then I had a new manager came in, but he was out of Georgia.
Okay.
He went back to Alpharetta, run the show. He's not aware of the history. He's kind of new. He doesn't know that I didn't have access to financial records. So in his mind, do their merit increases, do their pay increases. Okay. Now I have access to the paperwork.
Okay.
And I found out that one of the people that reported to me had a higher base salary than me.
Wow. Wow.
Wait a minute. Why? This person makes more money than me. This person reports to me and they make more money. Now, overall,
The overall income, I was higher because of bonuses. Managers get what they call 1 unit bonus, and subordinates, they get like a half of a unit.
Okay.
Right, so and that's represented in stock. So we get that bonus in stock. I would get a whole unit of stock, they would get a half unit of stock. From an overall salary perspective, would put me over the top. But the base salary without the bonus, you look at the month-to-month paycheck, this individual was making more than me. And that individual reported to me. Here I am with a master's degree of engineering. This person didn't have a degree at all. And I don't remember what the issue was, but I think it had to do with my promotion. Because me and him, we couldn't get past it. I said, well, out of respect for you, I'm letting you know that I'm going to send this request to HR at corporate headquarters.
Sure.
I don't want to do this behind your back, but you know what's coming. I'm going to send this complaint to HR, corporate headquarters, and have the issue addressed. So, I gave a long email with my history and my accomplishments and all of this good stuff, blah, blah, blah. And nothing ever came of it. Nothing ever came of it.
He is also brilliant and incredibly well read. Oh my gosh, this guy just eats books. Woody just eats books. I feel like in working with him, it was so great to have one-on-ones because you never knew what type of new data or new type of whatever he had just read or saw that he was really excited about and bring to the work.
And Woody's a really good example of one of the problems in this country where we don't really have working class scholarship. And that's one of the things I like about traveling. If you go to Europe, if you go to South America, working class people feel like they can engage in scholarship, and that's kind of been erased in this country, and there's a long history there. And so, one of the questions we have out of the incubator is like, what happens when working class people engage in scholarship? What kind of scholarship is produced? And I think Woody's a really good example of that, of someone who, not an academic, working class person, but has the same intellectual curiosity of an academic, but really no avenue or no apparatus to put that energy or to engage with, in that curiosity, especially in a collective setting. People like to read books, they like to discuss books, and working class people just don't have those mechanisms.
Wealth is power here in America. Wealth is, it has the say-so. It has the voice. It has the access to everything. The Black community owning 2.6 of the wealth has no voice. So when it comes to power and speaking or gaining or obtaining anything, where we don't have wealth, we don't have a voice. When we look at reparations and we talk about why that's the only solution, I mean, it's directly because of the numbers that we see as far as with the wealth gap. There's nothing that can close that. There's no individual efforts, individual initiatives or any amount of charity or anything. There's so much more that we need. Reparations is the only key that we have. So, I mean, even just through history, we've tried to do everything. We've done everything that we've been asked to do, and we're still seeing the same number. We're still seeing this 2.6. That needle does not move. So basically, out of the 26 million, this money is going to basically be spent on housing, built new homes. They have an initiative where they're supposed to have like 100 IT slots, training the people of the community. It's really open for the whole city, but they're saying that they're going to heavily recruit out of Russell. So basically, even all the slots aren't even promised to Russell, but also it's supposed to be going towards new businesses as well. So you have the training, then you have new businesses such as restaurants and different stores, grocery stores, etc. Their theory of change is that these jobs is supposed to help invest in the people so that they can make more money. Look at these job trainings. It's only 100 slots. How is it supposed to change actually a community when you actually having 4,000 households. You have 4,000 households that needs to be affected. There's been 4,000 households that's been affected by redlining and by the urban renewal. Even when you look on their site, it talks about how it's supposed to be this justice-based initiative. When you think of justice, it's supposed to bring justice to what's been done and the harm that it's talking about, dealing with redlining, dealing with the urban renewal. So then you have these 100 slots that really does not equate to really what's been done as far as through the policies and the laws that have wreaked havoc. So it affects a few people, it changes a few people, but as it doesn't change the whole. When I think about the racial wealth gap, I don't even really know why we even use the term gap. Because when you're looking at the gap between whites and blacks, we're looking at 2.6% of the wealth that's owned by blacks versus a 90% that's owned by whites. Really, you're looking at all and none. But then even when you look at how all of this was even created, when you look at slavery, all the policies, when you look at Jim Crow, when you look at the redlining and urban renewals and all the things that kind of come up through there just through history, that's what creates that wealth gap. That's really basically what the wealth gap is, the wealth between whites and blacks, the 2.6 versus the 90. Russell neighborhood makes up about 15% of the West End, basically. When you look at the population, as far as people, it's 9,000 plus. It's one of the 9 communities in the West End. It's made up of 3 different zip codes, 40211, 40212, and 4023. A lot of this research basically relied on Sandy Darity. Sandy Darity is a black economist from Duke University. He talks about these 10 myths when it comes to the solutions to upbuild or close the racial wealth gap. And basically what he does in this piece is he breaks down how these things does not work. Because there's been all types of solutions this gives nationwide, and really it seems like a bunch of regurgitated solutions. We see the same things happen in all the cities across America. Basically in that piece, he breaks down those 10 myths that people try to throw on the black community, telling them what they need to do, or even ourselves. We have even believed that if we do these things that it's going to bring change, but there's never really been an example of that. What my paper is addressing is the initiatives that Russell Place of Promise offers Russell, and we compare that to Sandy Darity's 10 myths, and we talk about what Darity says versus what Russell Place of Promise puts out. The first myth that I addressed was education attainment. An easy breakdown as far as when you look at education attainment, we're told that if only we get educated, that this will help close the wealth gap. But basically what Darity does, he has broken down actually the data that it shows even when getting the education, the income that we bring in is not enough to close the wealth gap. The second myth I looked at was dealing with the home ownership. Home ownership is not the same for whites and blacks. One of the biggest things, as far as like in our communities, due to the value of our homes. And when we're talking about investment and home ownership being one of America's top investments, in order to close the wealth gap, they're going to have to outpace white homes, which are worth a whole lot more. But we're not seeing that. When we're looking at owning a home, you're looking at a lot of people in households that makes $10,000 or less. On average, 20,000 for all of Russell, basically, which is not even enough to own a home. They can't, it's not enough to qualify to get the loan. As far as like the solution, you kind of see a mixture in the talk. We talk about Russell Place of Promise. A lot of the things that they're talking about it's on an individual level, but they try to act like that individual level is going to actually help the group. Basically, if you use to look at an analogy, if you can have an equation that's supposed to equal out to 20, 10 plus 10 that's going to equal 20, or 5 times 4 that's going to equal 20. Well, we see Russell Place of Promise offering is basically 1 plus 1 equals 2. We know that that's not going to add up to what's been done to the group. So it's the group that has been harmed. They're just fixing a few versus the whole. And reparations is a group initiative. What they're offering, these 100 slots or 135 homes, that's only individual intervention. Reparations is basically a debt that is owed to Black people because of what's been done. We're not talking about a charity or a handout or anything like that, philanthropic giving and all of that type stuff. These things doesn't work. This is something that's actually owed. This is a debt that is owed to the Black community. What we really see is that the Russell Place of Promise has an individual intervention versus a group intervention. Repairing a few individuals has never been a good solution when the whole community has been torn down by violent policies and laws. It's the whole community that needs repair. In conclusion, the only way of closing the racial wealth gap is reparations, and nothing else will do.
Whitney is the eldest of 7 and a mother of 3. She recently received her BA in sociology at Simmons College of Kentucky. She is a scholar and a cosmetologist. She currently works at Simmons, assisting faculty and staff with digital learning. As a community researcher at the Root Cause Research Center, she is working on a project that addresses issues in the racial wealth gap. This work is kind of like the explanation of why the program that she's been developing in her mind for years is so essential, right? And why it actually can be effective and have greater impact than a lot of these organizations that say that they serve the populations of West Louisville, right? When it comes to even encountering her, you got to realize there are so many different projects, programs, all these different things that are already operating in this beautiful nexus of imagining, inside of her.
Whitney's just been really just so inspiring and so positive. Anybody that has kids during COVID knows it's just difficult to get things done and still care enough about her community to want to engage in a research process like this. I mean, that's a level of commitment and dedication that you just don't see on a regular basis. And so just seeing that willingness to show up and participate and put into work, it's really inspiring for me personally, and I think it's kind of contagious for a lot of people.
Missy is very passionate about juvenile justice, ending incarceration, and housing justice. Missy studied at JCTC and was trained in community organizing by Black Lives Matter Louisville. She supports her community through advocacy work and mutual aid. Through the Black Lives Matter Louisville Mutual Aid Program, she's able to nourish others who may not have access to a home-cooked meal. She does ministry to folks that are currently incarcerated and does a lot of work with young folks who are currently or formerly incarcerated. And she is, of course, another community researcher working on issues around the racial wealth gap. She has put together so many strategies, so many solutions, right, that are outside of the norm and traditional models to really help young folks who have been touched by state violence, to help them actually be a part of community and feel held.
I want to add something about Missy, because Missy's really one of the unsung heroes of this community. And I think we saw this in the early stages of the pandemic, where nonprofits didn't know what to do. Because nonprofits, one, are not set up for crisis relief. They don't do a lot of direct service, and they don't do advocacy. And so the people who were already doing direct service and advocacy were just doing what they do every day, and suddenly they were kind of lifted up. For a moment, they were lifted up where the nonprofits were kind of wringing their hands of we don't know what to do. Meanwhile, people like Missy Wilson were doing what they do every day with no recognition. And so Missy works for the Louisville Community Bail Fund. Missy delivers food through Black Lives Matter Louisville, been a BLM member for a long time. And so, the people that know.
We are
here to present a resource of change with the aim of helping those with psychological behavior as well as physical trauma, stress, and turmoil find more productive ways to navigate through life. We have decided to be the change and healing we hope to see in our city. I have partnered with Missy Wilson to become a voice of change for people in our community. By change, we mean to provide and guide those who suffer from a persistent lack of resources, help those who suffer with social isolation, and give opportunity to those who has been greatly affected by systematic oppression of the Black, brown, and poor communities. We will look at the root causes as well as the effects that these issues have on the community, with a special focus on the effects of mass incarceration, poverty, adverse childhood experiences, and post-traumatic slave syndrome. We will also propose restorative solutions featuring not only one, but two Black-led interventions. Post-traumatic slave syndrome, which is an uncommon term from Joy DeGarry that explains intergeneration trauma that has impacted the thought process of disparaged people of African descent. According to the CDC website, adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, which is due to abuse, neglect, death of a parent or sibling, parent separation, and so on, can cause immediate and long-term physical and mental harm. People who have experienced ACEs often suffer from lung illness, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, and many more chronic health problems throughout the course of their lives. ACEs can be experienced throughout all people groups. We would like to take a look at the Black community. There has not been much study or no real way for the Black community to heal from the trauma they have faced for decades. This has led to post-traumatic slave syndrome. S.T.E.P stands for Sisters That Elevate Purposes, because we're always trying to help and heal people, and I just really believe that the woman, if she's together, she could really move the family. I want to help motivate and uplift our women. So S.T.E.P, we don't just work with women, we also work with the family. So our goal, if a woman and their dad, they're not together, we still want to provide resources for the dad, because we feel like, believe that the foundation is as stable as the parents. If a person comes into our building, we will first meet them and greet them at the front door and just love on them and talk to them and introduce ourselves. And then we will get into what are their needs, what are they going through, what is going on. Then we will provide other resources. And so they may be able to get their hair done, they may need our child care, they may need our family mentoring, where we have partnered with families to walk these families through life, to help them, to encourage them, and tell them the things that they were able to use, and introduce them to some people that will be able to help them out. It's access. I had mentors and life coaches, but I believe they really gave me that access. I see therapy and cosmetology coexisting together because myself, I am a stylist. I received my cosmetologist license in 2010, and I noticed so many conversation that was going on amongst the women and the men that I was styling the hair. I was like, wow, this could be an actual healing, counseling type therapeutic space. Everything that I was able to go through, it has built me to be able to help other people in our community. We want just a holistic approach to our families to help them get to where they need to be. The trauma is also physical. It causes physical pain. They're able to receive massages and go through our healing track. They will have the salon track, where we will hire either stylists that have been already working at a salon, or stylists that has graduated from cosmetology school, because we want to be a support for them. So we want to provide a safe therapeutic place for them to build, but also provide a service for our clients. The beauty of our outside makes us feel good inside. You know, if we go to get our hair done, we go get a scalp treatment, a facial, it just lifts us up, makes us feel good. And then the connection in the Black community, we just form so many connections and networking within our barbershops and hair salons. First, we want to look at the family's life and their history, especially if they have children. So if they have children, we want to see what type of environment they're in. Do they need housing? Do they need food? What are their needs? What are their immediate needs, first of all? And then we would get to how the family dynamic is working. A lot of times with trauma, like Joy said, our thought process can affect what we really want to do. And so sometimes we got to go through a training or a healing to get us back to actually where we want to be. And so we would look at the family dynamic and see, okay, are the parents working together to be a family to provide the needs of the children? And if not, if they're doing well, okay, but if they are not and they need some help, we will provide the resources they need. And so I know some families need that lawyer to work out custody and child support issues, but we want to be that help and resource. So many moms feel so hopeless because they don't have the funds to be able to hire lawyers or people to help them. We want to provide life skills, you know, parenting classes. Your child needs to go to the doctor, their child going to the dentist, to help them get on a track where they are functioning at a maximum extent to help them move forward. Our initial goal is $50,000, but I would love to have that $2 million because our annual goal to pay our employers, to get equipment, a building. And so I want to be able to take care of my community, to pay them good. I want to be able to have the facility to meet the needs of the community. So whether it's that therapeutic where they get the massage, they get their hair done, they be able to have the childcare. Working with kids that has been through trauma, you have to be just very careful and provide their needs. And so we want to have everything that we can to be able to provide the needs for the community. So it's food, you know, supplies, scholarships, resource for our child care. We always want to promote good stimulation for our children that go into our child care. It's to hire other people to come in to teach classes because we realize we can't do it all and everybody does not want to do it for free. And so we need the funds to be able to hire people to be able to support our cause. We realize that it's not just one person to help these families. We need a whole village to walk alongside of these families. If you would like to contribute, you can visit STEPS2SuccessKY.org.
And I had thought about the kids, the youth down here in the West End, but I'm really want to target the ones that's locked up for petty issues or whatever. Them are the ones who I want to grab and bring them to this house so they won't commit no more crimes or anything, and they won't have to go 5 hours away because they just stole a pack of bubble gum or something like that. So if I can grab them, get a hold of them, talk to the lawyer and the judge and have a contract going, okay, instead of you seeing Bobby to boot camp down here in Paducah, you can send them to the West End of Louisville on 39th and Market to Missy Safe House, and I will work with them for that 3 to 6 months, because you might give them longer than that, but we can work with the 3 to 6 months here. We at 39th and Market. This is where I would love to have the Missy Safe House located, in this area right here. Up and down Market Street right here and across Market, going down 39th Street, That's why I chose right here, so they can see the good things that's going on right here in this spot out of that house. You will come here, you will learn everything about the situation that you did, and we'll move forward from there. Because you will have structure. You know, I'm not saying that you might not have had it at home at that time, but there will be structure, and you will understand what structure is. So everybody deserves a second chance. I'm with helping them more than once, because who am I to judge someone? We all fall short. We all keep doing stuff and keep doing stuff. The ones who's down there, stuck down there, them are the ones who, you know, still need help, because everybody don't change at the same time. It didn't take me at the age of 14 to change. When I got older, that's when I changed. God decided, well, let me go on and change her, because I wasn't ready to be changed. So I'm willing to keep working with people over and over and over again, because people are working with my child over and over again. So I'm willing. I will bring the guys that have been incarcerated on the same level as they had, that they got charged with whatever they out here doing, to show them that, okay, this is his story. Pay attention to his story, and his story is going to help you. So that's how I will team them up with that, with someone who had already have done time or anything, that, and let them know how they changed. I have people that's with over AAU team. If they want to do that, I can find someone who's in the music business, or whatever it is that they want to do, and they trying to pursue it. We will have people in that area to come in, talk to them, and get them engaged in it. I will still do it for the community. That way they will earn their stipends of helping me cook, bring it to the community, and then we will also cook in the house. And that way, if they old enough, 15, I feel that you're a little old enough to be able to cook your own meal. So we'll work on that in that house, but we will also still do the community feeding, and that's how they will earn part of their stipends also. People's already complaining about all the crimes that's going on in the west end of Louisville, and if we keep complaining and not do anything about it, nothing will change. So instead of complaining, that's when you should help build this foundation with me, so we can change. It could be your child that might need to be helped, your family member. So that's why we should help. We should help put this right here. I'm looking for them to be very dependable, motivated in this, because I'm going to sit down and talk to you about my whole plan, what my vision is, what I want to come up out of this, and either they tell me yes or no, but I do already have a staff in mind who I want to use, and I know that they are very dedicated. So them are the ones that I'm really targeting right now, and I know that it's going to work out.
Working with Missy, we came together in the middle of our research, but we both knew that we wanted to help families work through their trauma. And so it's a good collaboration with me and Missy. I don't have the capacity to work with the youth that has been through trauma, but Missy does. So we can have a family that is going, the parents could be going through our track, and the younger siblings could be in our child care, but we can also work with that team to keep them out of the system. And so that's where Missy comes in. We can be able to have a resource to be able to help our teens stay out of the juvenile system. So we're not only working with our moms, but we're working with the whole family. As Brandy said during the Hip Hop BET Awards, our skin is not our weakness. We cannot just settle at the surface, because the trauma cuts the deepest. Believe in God, and I add, love one another, because we all bleed the same. Peace.
Catrice is a fierce advocate and a powerhouse outreach coordinator. She is also a founding member of the Louisville Eviction Lab. Catrice studied theater arts at JCTC and was trained in community organizing by Black Lives Matter Louisville and Broken Hearted Homes. As a former resident of Beecher Terrace, she is very passionate about housing justice and the right to remain in one's community. When the Louisville Eviction Lab was first formed earlier this year as a cohort, she was a natural fit for working with folks that were experiencing eviction, right? To be that type of support mechanism in eviction when we were doing the Occupy Eviction courtroom work. Because not only is she the type of person that is going to really hear you, but you're going to feel that she gives a shit. She absolutely 100%, and she gives a damn shit, and it's going to make sure that you get what you need because she knows how important those things are. There is no one more empathetic than Catrice, and there is no one who is going to be a better gladiator for you, once you're in her embrace.
And so we throw around these terms a lot, like systemic violence and systemic issues or structural issues, but we don't really contextualize what those things actually are. And so Sophie's playing in the other room, so you're going to get that on the tape. But really understanding like what it takes for Catrice to show up, right? And most people just get ready for work and they come to work in the morning. And I think a lot of people at higher class levels have no idea like what it takes for other people to get to that same space every day.
Shamika is the founder of an organization called Broken Hearted Homes, which is a renters association that focuses on eviction prevention and slumlord elimination in greater Louisville and surrounding areas. She is on her way to becoming a one-stop shop location for housing needs. She is also a founder of the Louisville Eviction Lab. I know it's been talked about a little bit more since the development of some of these institutional eviction strategies and eviction programs, but a lot of these eviction programs and strategies are just co-opting of language that Shamika had already published, had already shared in some capacity on social media, from her Facebook page, or for work that she's done in collaboration with other organizations like Root Cause Research Center, Black Lives Matter, like all of us who've been working in this eviction, housing and justice space for a while. And that's incredibly painful, right? That's incredibly painful. So we're hoping that this publishing will be a way to prevent future theft from institutions that might try to co-opt.
Also with Shamika, I met Shamika years ago. What was happening to me, I was in conversations with a lot of housing advocates and lawyers who were really discounting what I was saying. Well, this is what's happening in eviction court. There are a lot of illegal evictions happening, and that was really being dismissed. People say, well, they can't do that. That's illegal. And I'm like, yeah, they're doing it. It happens every day, right? And so Shamika was there. And so Shamika kind of steps up and was like, oh, yeah, that's exactly what happened to me like 3 times, right? And through our combined efforts, they were not able to dismiss that as a reality. But what we found that those intersections of data research and experiential knowledge was a really powerful tool to combat this sort of erasure that happens in those spaces.
I will be talking about evictions during a global pandemic, COVID-19, and concentrating on the top evictors and the ones who receive the most money from the eviction prevention funds. The second wave is coming, and it's not COVID, it's evictions. So let's talk about it. The COVID-19 timeline. March 13, 2020, Governor Beshear issued a stay-at-home order, shutting the city down over the next 2 weeks. This is where all hell broke loose. 5/8/2020, Governor Beshear issued an eviction moratorium, stopping all evictions till the end of the state of emergency. And also, the Kentucky Supreme Court issued a halt on eviction filings until July the 1st, 2020. The protections that these moratoriums offered merely delayed mass evictions. 5/25/2020, Beshear amended his order to suspend evictions for non-payment of rent, but allow owners to still be evicted for other violations like the nuisance order. 7/7/2020, Greater Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky Apartment Association. They filed a lawsuit against Governor Andy Beshear because they wanted to be able to file evictions again. 7/27/2020, the Kentucky Supreme Court allowed courts to resume evictions for non-payment of rent starting August the 1st, 2020. On 8/24/2020, Governor Beshear actually issued a new executive order which required landlords to issue a 30-day notice with the intent to evict for non-payment of rent, which made landlords and tenants have to meet and confer. Basically, you have to come together and figure out a solution. There's all this eviction prevention money. You're saying you're evicting someone for non-payment of rent. Here's some money. You can initiate the payment. The tenant can initiate the payment, but you have to show that you did everything to exhaust all of your resources in order to file this eviction. Beshear has also announced the Healthy at Home Eviction Relief Funds, which was $15 million that came from CARE Act money, reimbursing eligible landlords for missed and advanced rent payments to keep tenants healthy at home. So to this point, Metro government has paid up to $21 million in eviction assistance, $15 million of this being CARES Act money. Based on the data that we received from the Jefferson County Administrative Offices of the courts, there were 1,165 evictions filed from March 1st to September the 30th. There were 438 eviction judgments, but we believe that there were actually more judgments due to illegal evictions and people who self-evict, which is just up and leaving when they get the notice. They just up and move, and we're still looking for them. So let's talk about the top evictors during the COVID, and let's see how much of the COVID relief fund money they received. Broadway Management. They filed 54 evictions, and they got 41 judgments. They received over $97,784 in eviction fund money. So that was like $1,029 per unit. That was 95 units. Second top evictor, All Trade. They evicted 22 families in one day, October the 10th, 2020. They received $70,845 of eviction funds for 64 units, and that was an average of $1,107. But they evicted 22 people in one day. Derby Estates Apartment. They evicted 16 people. They received $44,647 from the eviction prevention funds for 49 units, a total of like $726 per unit. But they received $44,000. Mirage Properties, the number one of the most slumlords in the city, received the most money, $109,667. 439 units, it's like $789 per unit. They evicted 5 people. Since the funds became available, Louisville Metro has paid $7.14 million in rental assistance for like 7,207 units. And that's the average of $900 per unit. So despite the CARES Act covering properties that receive federal subsidiaries, if you don't know what a federal subsidiary is, it's like Section 8, LMHA still received $48,048 in rental assistance, even though all their units are covered under the CARES Act. Why? Louisville Metro Housing Authority, that's like the city paying the city. They're the top evictors in the city, period. So let's talk about real life situations that have happened during the COVID that I've dealt with personally myself. There's a mother of 4. She had a new baby in April. By May, she was evicted. The landlord said it was for non-payment of rent, but he used the nuisance order and the fact that he wouldn't sign a new lease during the COVID to get her evicted. Vista Properties, Kentucky, evicted a 77-year-old disabled Black woman. The eviction was blocked It was covered under the CDC order. We was able to get the judge to sign off on it. So they actually had possession of that property until December the 31st, January 1, 2020. But 2 weeks after the CDC order was enacted, we had her squared away. Jefferson County Sheriff's Department and Vista Properties came in and removed Miss Battles from her house. She had to be flown from Louisville, Kentucky, all the way to Arizona, where her son resides, in order to find safety, because there was nowhere safe to put her and keep her healthy at home. And the most recent case that we just became aware of is the 77-year-old Miss Easley, who is a family of 8. She cares for 4 of her grandchildren, and they're trying to place a newborn now, but she does not have a place to live because she was violently snatched from her home when the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department allowed the property manager to come in, and him and his goons tossed their stuff out of the upstairs windows of their house. So the Sheriff Department has blatantly been disrespecting the CDC moratorium orders, the governor's executive orders, and just doing what they want to do. This owner also received $2,500 from the eviction prevention funds, but they were somehow able to go to the court and get an immediate writ, which was to get an immediate possession of that property, to go in within 24 hours of posting a notice. 24 hours later, that family is homeless now, unhoused, and living in a hotel room with 8 people. The rental assistance has been ineffective because there's really nobody regulating it. So you're making it real top heavy for the tenant, making them the ones required to do all the work for the CDC moratorium, for the rental assistance, for the landlord to get paid. But at the same time, by the time the landlord does receive payment, the tenant's already evicted. So the rental assistance is ineffective because you're giving money to landlords for tenants that are no longer occupying the units. So what do we need to do in order to stop this mass eviction? Cancel rent. Just as simple as that. Cancel the rent. Let's start all over in 2021. 2020 came in and knocked everything over. So let's start all over. Cancel the rent. Stop the mass evictions. The landlords have been paid. The mortgage companies have been bailed out. The only people who've not been bailed out is us, the impacted residents, the tenants, the ones who don't have no other option. Housing is essential. It's not essential to the property maintenance companies. It's a business for them. So they got the small business loans. We're still waiting on the second half of our stimulus check. So in conclusion, I have questions. And my questions is, how many of the 438 evictions were covered under the CARES Act? Number 2, why Louisville Metro Housing Authority received $48,048 of eviction prevention funds when all of their properties are covered under the CARES Act? And will there be an audit of the eviction prevention funds to see to it that the monies that were used were for who and what they said it was? Thank you.
Housing is ridiculous. Waiting lists are months to years long. Like, there's nowhere for anyone to go. I want an audit done on Louisville Metro Housing Authority to get a clear understanding of where all the funds are going to. And I feel like as a resident for 10 years and a community member, I have a right to do so. Upon further research, including court data, it was revealed those numbers were way off. 524 households. 524 households were evicted. And of these evictions, how many of these evictions were lease violations? How many of those could have been actually remedied or cured? Even though the filing of evictions were lower, Louisville Metro Housing Authority judgments of evictions increased in year 2017, proving that Louisville Metro Housing Authority were more aggressive in pursuing evictions. So Urban Strategies created a shield of Black employees to protect rich white leadership from optics of being a racist villain, throwing Black people, poor Black people, out on the street. Urban Strategies has done nothing, absolutely nothing for my community, other than act as a smokescreen for our displacement. The closer we got to relocating, the more I noticed, witnessed, and heard stories of more families being evicted, thrown out on the streets. And for pettier reasons, may I add. A boyfriend of hers had her address on his ID. He got caught up in some stuff with the police. And because on his ID, he wasn't on her property or anything, he was just in the neighborhood. Because her address was on his ID, from whatever he had going on, she was evicted for it. And he wasn't on her lease. I know someone that was evicted within a few months after their displacement from them losing their job in Louisville Metro Housing Authority, not actively giving them an appointment and doing the things they need to do for them to be able to get their rent payment adjusted in time enough to pay on time and pay what they, what was by their income. So I think that that's petty. I feel like that's something that could have been remedied. They could have had, instead of evicting her and throwing her on the streets, they could have gave her an appointment in a timely manner. Or once they realized it, got her in and took care of it, and she could still be housed. But she's homeless, sleeping on her sister's couch. So that's petty to me. That wasn't happening years prior, before the relocation. Like, I've never heard of anyone getting evicted because someone has their address on their ID. Like, that was unheard of. So that right there was just like, oh, they're on some bullshit. The grant, this $29 million housing choice initiative, what exactly happened with those funds? And not just some of them, all of them, including the ones that y'all got back from the folks that were evicted. Where is that money? We, the community, demand real, clear-cut answers. Signed, a curious displaced resident.
Hello, everyone.
I was gonna go that.
Let's give everybody a big hand and a round of applause for those great research projects and presentations. We are going to get into Q&A, and so the Root Cause Research Center, we have our own questions for the panelists. Please put your questions in the chat or in the Q&A, and we'll select those as well. And so I just want to say thank you to everybody. I am really filled up emotionally with the work that you all have done. This has been tremendous. And so with that, we're going to start with a question for Marlisha. And Marlisha, I was watching your presentation and I was just wondering, I know you did a lot of investigation around public art in Louisville. And was there anything that you found that was shocking, or any really major find that you were really surprised by?
The majority of the information that I found over the 6 months, sad to say, I wasn't too surprised because it's an industry that I'm familiar with, and I hear stories from different artists, both visual and performing. And so I know a lot of the backdrop that never makes its way to front page. It happens quite a bit. The only thing that was really, I guess, shocking for me is to see the correlation between redevelopment, we'll say looming gentrification, we'll say possible, put in air quotes, possible, gentrification and art, and how the investment is tied to, you know, art, public art. I didn't think of that before. That was not on my radar. But now that it is, it's one of those things like a train wreck. You can't unsee it. So it's very prevalent. And I'm sure if I keep looking, there'll be something else to pop up. But yeah, that definitely was shocking for me.
Thank you for that. And so what you're basically saying that in redevelopment efforts, we start to see images and murals go up in neighborhoods that are experiencing investment, and neighborhoods that aren't getting that kind of investment, we don't see the same investment in public art.
Exactly. Right. It's a precursor to, it can be a precursor to gentrification. It is a delusional idea to think that all of the Black and brown faces that are painted in Louisville were created by Black and brown people. They were meant to inspire or even speak to the community of Black and brown people where they're created. But that's the complete opposite of typical articles that come out. Like if a work of art is up, it's public arts, right? It's for the public to consume. There is this idea in the background that the art was meant for the people that live there. But what happens if the people are not even living there next summer? So, right, if it wasn't created for them, but the image is of them, then Black and brown people are amusement, right? Like it's a source of entertainment. And we're talking about racial and cultural consumption. Like this is the goal to commercialize or to commodify a particular group or a particular narrative. So the exploitation of Black narratives is happening all the time, but it's not so easily recognizable to tie it to gentrification or we'll call it revitalization until you look at data over the course of time, and you'll start to see a spike. The spike that I saw, of course, if you're from Louisville, Kentucky, if you're not, thank you all for joining, but there's the New Lou area, and then there's also Smoketown, which New Lou has already happened. So the gentrification question is not even relevant at this point. It is what it is. Like that's a stamp of approval. People are gone and displaced, and that has turned into an art business district that no longer has predominantly Black or brown people in it. And Smoketown has got a lot of attention right now, and a lot of that attention includes public art and investment, but people are still being displaced.
And so did you find that many of the artists creating these murals are white artists and funded by white organizations?
That's correct. The average in any of the data sets that I found, typically all of the panels, the juried panels that select the artists are whitewashed. The administrators, typically you're looking at 100%, if not close to 100% administrative system, we'll call it system, that's completely white, that's selecting a jury panel that again is near all white to then create an artist team to go into particular neighborhoods and create artwork. And those artists that are selected typically are predominantly white. In the nonprofit organizations, they are predominantly white. Yes.
Thank you for that. Do you have anything else you want to add about your project or want to talk about before we move on?
Well, yes, I'm not going to eat up too much time, but there's a particular case, and there's, again, when the reports are rolled out, there's more information that I can share. But essentially, for example, because I can tell you that it's happening, but if I could show you, it's a little more intimate and relevant, and it's in your face and you can't unsee it. All right, so there is a particular festival that happened in the city of Louisville last year. It was called the Imagine Mural Festival. That particular festival was launched through a nonprofit organization, and artists were selected. Now that panel did have the artists that were selected. There were racially identified minorities, and there were also white artists involved, right? So you did have Black and brown representation. It was much lower, but you did have, Black and brown people involved creating the artwork, as well as white artists. Now there's a particular piece of artwork that's created by a white artist of what is to be perceived as a Black female. And when I say to be perceived as a Black female, it's because the facial recognition, right? The facial structure, the intention is to have ethnic, cultural representation there. So when you look at the image, you see nose, you see mouth, you see, some would say, stereotypical features of a Black woman. So when I saw the image at first, I was like, okay, I get it. Like, is it supposed to be the Black person or someone that is considered a racial minority? The painting is actually in all blue because it has a symbolic reference, which is something that the artist took, their interpretation to spin on. The reality is that piece of work that is now on the side of a building was created from an actual photograph, the photograph of the female and her child mother. It was all inspired by an article that was launched through HuffPost that was celebrating Black breastfeeding. It had 9 photographs of mothers and their children. Speaking of empowerment, body autonomy, like you have full rights to breastfeed, and that was the goal. What happens is when you have an all whitewash panel of individuals, and let's just say there's maybe one racial minority in the group, which equivalent to tokenism. When you only have that perspective, you can get blinded by white privilege, and then you're stuck in this funnel where you don't see what I see. So when I saw the artwork, I'm not saying the artwork is not uplifting to breastfeeding, but by repackaging an actual human, now we have the story is lost, the original context is lost. There's no historical context because Black breastfeeding, there's a lot of links to slavery. So if you Google Black breastfeeding, you're not going to see a lovely image of a mother and a child connected. Anyone that's Black or brown knows that the standard for breastfeeding in slavery wasn't that a Black woman would be breastfeeding her own child, but she was the wet nurse for white children. And oftentimes Black babies were killed or they died through lack of nutrition. So we're talking about infant mortality rates, we're talking about maternal health, all of these things that could be triggers and trauma now painted on the side of a building. That's the historical context. Then we have the social context of placing it up as a source of hope, right? A source of hope for marginalized people that are in a community that is a nurturing and mothering community. I get it. And that makes sense only if the people actually get to stay. But if the people don't get to stay and they're displaced, it's like a big reminder that, hey, I made this for you, but you won't be here next year. So that social context, historical context, and then the cultural misappropriation. The reality is stories are told all the time, and stories without context are flawed because people can be retold, repackaged. I actually got the pleasure of meeting virtually the woman that the photo was taken of recently this week. I spoke to her, and she's not even from the city where the art is created. So again, it could have been someone in the city to make it more close to home and inspiring, but instead, the lady lives northeast in New Jersey. She is not, it's really easy to take some image of a person and reframe them into a stereotypical framework of what could be, right? So I am a Black woman. I am a mother. So if you see my photograph and you need a snippet real quick, I could be placing an ad for single mothers, but I'm not single. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is speaking of a neighborhood that is supposed to be, I guess the artwork was to uplift single mothers, people that are impoverished, people that are marginalized. I spoke to the lady on the Northeast. She's married. She's in a doctorate program. She is a mother that had this whole narrative that was in HuffPost, which was wonderful and uplifting. It was her words, but none of those words ever made not one article that was republished in the city of Louisville. There are 5 articles that I found from different media outlets. Her name is never mentioned. She's completely separated from the artwork. And historically, for Black and brown people during slavery, what was the first thing to go? Our names. Our names were taken away, and then our bodies were commodified. Now, was that the intention for the artwork? I don't speak on intentions of the heart because I can't do that. But regardless, there's the intention and then there's the harm that's created. And so the reality is this: we look at art, but like I stated in the video, art without accountability is flawed, right? So this image is up there, and anyone that's driving past it or walking past it, you would assume that this is a character of the imagination. The humanness is completely extracted, but there's a real human with a real child with a name and a face and a narrative that's completely different than what's on the side of that building. And it was a pleasure to speak to that mother because her story is nothing like what is created in the articles. And again, on social media, 4 social media outlets, 5 articles, and not one of them mentioned her name. But and of course, the Expo is today. Something about this didn't make sense to me the entire time I've been working, and not just on this particular piece, but in general for 6 months. In the back of my mind, I'm like, it just doesn't make sense. And so I just dug a little deeper. And in 3 hours time, I found her. In less than 24 hours, we were on a virtual call from New Jersey to Southern Indiana. And I sat down and I now humanized the story. I'm now taking her identity and placing it back where it should be in the forefront instead of repackaging her. Not only was it on the building, but eventually it was turned into merchandise. And so that image was replicated again. And that image was sold out of a local boutique, right? And I asked her, I said, did you get any profit from this? Because we are talking about the racial wealth gap. I said, you know, this is the image of you and your daughter. Did anyone offer you any financial gain from? Oh, no. And we're not talking about the Huff Post, right? Because that's something she took the photograph. She was happy to do it. It was empowering for her. Her narrative is there. Like if you go to that article, you have quote verbatim what she stated. She's all intact. Her humanity is there. But in Louisville, Kentucky, we don't even know if she's real or not. But the blue lady's real. She's Black. And I have an article with her speaking. And almost 3 hours to talk about what is going on in her mind, not knowing. And because she's not in the city, she only had fragments of information. She didn't receive not one article about her muse, her inspiration after she was used for the muse and inspiration. Only this week was I able to give her trace back to her own image. Now, how often are Black and brown people used for entertainment? All the time. And whether exploitation was intentional or not, that's not the point. The reality is that all of these people, all of these organizations were so close and so intimate to a process, and not one person caught what I caught. Social context, historical context, cultural context. Why didn't you get it? Because there wasn't really Black and brown people in the room talking. It was a whitewash system. And it was like, cool story though. And not only was it an economic issue, now we're talking about, you know, what I consider, I term it human mining, to excavate resemblance, language, culture of a particular group of people, repackage and resell it. That's what happened. But that's not anything, you can't find this anywhere, not one article. It's not gonna be out there. This is the first time I've even vocally, publicly spoke about it, but it's very much real. And so is the lady that we don't have a name for, but she has a name.
So I have the images like queued up. If you'd like me to share my screen, I can show them side by side so people can see the original photo and the mural that's up in Smoketown. Would you like me to do that, Marlisha?
Sure, so they could see the context. It was in the video, there were some images, but they might not remember those. There is a link. Now the link in a particular article, if you click on that link, you have to do the homework, you know, then to find the person. But how easily would it have been to make sure that in every article, her name was there? So now that she's on the East Coast, she can Google her name. And when she types in her name, Louisville, Kentucky mural, she pops up. Now she's an advocate for breastfeeding, maternal health. She's working on a doctorate. She has a business aside, you know, from just being a part of this art muse. Wouldn't that be wonderful to uplift and amplify her story? But none of that has taken place. And that happened last year, you know, a little over a year ago. And there's no trace of her. That's erasure, to take someone and to completely separate them from their resemblance and then give a new story as the inspiration, even in the terms of the boutique that sold the image off, right? Like it was in the form of merchandise that people could be inspired by and you know, purchase prints of it, and I think stickers or something like that. She didn't get any of the funds. It didn't even cross anybody's mind. Hey, yo, this lady's real, right? Because as she continued to be extracted, her humanness was lost to the point where, why would I connect her? I don't even know her name. Well, she had a name, and I found it within, like 3 hours. And again, complete stranger. I don't know her. She doesn't know me. When I approached her, just, I have some questions. I'm just kind of curious about the process. And we're talking also, and I'm going to wrap it up. We're talking about processes that they should not take 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Now, I understand murals and public art, sometimes they go up really quickly because of funding, the investment, right? Money is dropped, money needs to be released, art needs to be made. Now, the intention behind that, I don't know. Time will see. We'll all see, right? Anybody on this panel will see in a couple of years what that little area looks like, and we'll see if Black and brown people are still there. But what we do know definitively is that typical projects, whether you're in the art industry or not, any project that is of quality is not going to be 2-week turnaround time, 3-week turnaround time. Now, she was contacted in late August, again, which will be released later. You could hear it from her. She was contacted in late August. The artwork was up in September. Articles that I found were in October. Pretty quick. So quick that she wasn't included in the planning of the image. So not only was she's the inspiration, but she never said, hey, excuse me, I would like to make sure that ... happens with my image. No, the image was already created, repackaged, handed to her like, hey, what do you think about this? The cart before the horse. And again, no one in that room, figurative room, Hamilton this, when people say being in the room where it happens, no one in the context of this frame of before it happened, during, and even after a year later, stop to say, yo, she's real. Her story matters. And mentioning a DJ quote, you're talking about single stories. She was repackaged into the single story of Black single mother. She's not a Black single mother. She's not impoverished. She's working on a doctorate. She's an advocate. None of that. The entire empowerment piece of her is gone. But now we're speaking to people that live in Smoketown that may or may not be living there next week or next year. That's just one story.
Thank you for that, Marlisha. And like Marlisha said, these reports are going to be published tomorrow. Along with Marlisha's written report, we have a story map that's coming out and several videos of additional interviews around her project. And so with that, we'll move to Shannon. And Shannon, I kind of had a similar question for you. You did so much research. And I know, anytime you do research, we all go in with our own hypothesis of what we think we're going to find. Was there anything that shocked or surprised you that came out of that?
No, not at all. I went into the project, the research, with my eyes wide open because it was really based on my own personal experiences. My goal was just to find supporting evidence, not for me, but for people who need facts, data, and numbers. None of it surprised me. I wasn't shocked by anything. For me personally, how could I be as an African-American woman who has been in the labor force for decades? None of it surprised me.
One of the things that we try to do at the Root Cause Research Center is really redefine what data is and what information is. And so one of the things about your research project is that you didn't actually get the information that you were seeking because the companies refused to hand over the data. And so the way we viewed that is that refusal to hand over data is still data.
Okay.
Right? And so can you elaborate on that?
Okay. Well, let me backpedal on that point or the question then. I was surprised, I was shocked by the fact that the EEOC requires racial demographics from employers. The employers leave it basically to the applicants to determine whether or not they want to give that information. They are required to turn it over to the EEOC. And the EEOC determines that information as confidential.
I was surprised. Yeah, I was shocked. That's one thing. I was surprised and shocked that they protect that information about public employers. And it's a federal agency, and it was originally created as a result of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to combat discrimination and bias in the labor market. And they won't publicize, or they consider that confidential. That was shocking. And the fact that of the big 5 employers, I mean, it's just 5 employers. You know, there are millions of employers out there. I just don't make connection with why they deem that as so confidential. If race doesn't matter, because, you know, people will throw out that in a minute that, you know, race is not a factor. It doesn't matter. We're in a post-racial America after the election of President Obama or what have you. If it's no big deal, then it's no big deal. And why is it still considered confidential? That's one thing that was shocking. The only thing.
Thank you for that. And so our next question is for Woody. And Woody, when I was looking at I was just listening to your project, and we've talked about this before. I think it's important in your project to kind of lift up the notion that things like housing programs, education programs, you're not necessarily opposed to those things, but you're making a specific point about the impact of those things. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, definitely not opposed to help or, you know, business initiatives and things like that that's going to, you know, help our community or people, period. Not opposed. I mean, even when you, I guess even when you even think about far as Louisville, you know, we can even look at some stats. So we know that there is all types of disparities when it comes to Black Louisville. You know, we know that Blacks make up, what, 22.4% of the Louisville population and make up 78% of Louisville's homelessness. You know, I mean, and then on top of that, you have the Black poverty rate in Louisville is nearly 3 times as much as the white poverty rate. You look at even when you're looking at college graduates on average, you know, with black graduates and white graduates, there's like a 10,000 less per year than their white, you know, white colleagues. So, I mean, that even tells us in itself that is there help needed? Yes, there is help needed. We do need, there's a lot of help that's needed. I'm trying to even find the words to even to say, but at the end of the day, when it comes to racial wealth gap and help needed in these initiatives, a lot of the things that are even painted far as when it comes to helping, we're finding that it's not actually what it is. In a sense, to me, it's like it's wolf in sheep's clothing. In a sense, I would even say, just due to the fact, I feel like that the help that people, the city knows what they're doing. This is nothing new. Far as what's happened when it comes to gentrification and all of these things, when we're looking at Russell Place of Promise, that's kind of, you know, we're looking at Russell Place of Promise, and they're saying that they're going to uplift this, uplift the people, uplift the property and all those things. In reality, like kind of reiterating as far as like in the video, that, you know, in reality it's going to only help a few. They know that. they know that what's going to happen. I mean, like even when we look at when we even look on the website, you know, it admits to the redlining, it admits to the urban renewal efforts of 1960s, and it even says that it has destroyed the opportunities for generational wealth building and knowledge transfer. All of those things are said, you know. So, but in response to that, I guess we have Russell Place of Promise that pops up as a response to what's happening, and they call it a justice-based initiative. Justice to what? To what happened to all of Russell, again. So I mean, even there. But what we're actually seeing, that this Black wealth building and investment without displacement, that's the key. But really what we're seeing is not happening. You know, when you think of the 4,000 households that's in Russell, That's the answer. We need an equation, just like when you was in school, you know, when we was coming up in school, we used to have worksheets that would, in math, that would start out with an answer. You'd have an answer, but you had to come up with an equation that would match that answer. We're not necessarily seeing that. We're seeing a big number of this 4,000 households that's been impacted by the red line and everything that they admitted to. But at the end of the day, we're seeing like 135 homes, which is nowhere near close. We're seeing 100 slots for some type of training. That doesn't come nowhere close to this 4,000 that needs to be affected. And other buildings that are going up. And in reality, you know, these things are supposed to help the people ultimately, but really what we're seeing is banishment and gentrification that's happening so far as even closing the wealth gap. These things is not happening. And I guess to even add to that, I mean, to me, it's more like what's being told is it's like we're being pissed on and being told that it's rain at the end of the day. So.
Thank you for that. And we had a question that came into the chat about how the topics were chosen. And so everyone chose their own topic. And really the idea behind this was that people are experts in their own areas that affect them, that people who are closest to the problem are closest to the solution and should be closest to power. And so everyone picked their own topic based on what they were already sort of investigating or experiencing. And so with that, I'll move on to Whitney. And we had a question come in the Q&A that's similar to the question I was going to ask anyway, Whitney. And the question deals with the idea of respectability politics and the idea that people need to take responsibility and for themselves, pull themselves up by the bootstraps. And so when you talk about post-traumatic slave syndrome and the need for the type of intervention that you're proposing, why is that your theory of change, and why can't people simply lift themselves up out of poverty and on an individual level?
Sure. Thank you for this opportunity too. It's just been great. I'm proud of everybody. But I believe so. What we're talking about right now, we're talking about trauma. When in the workforce, we're talking about in the institutions, with the art, we're talking about trauma. And so this trauma has been going on for years, generation after generation within the Black community. We have talked about the Jewish, we have talked about the Native Americans, some, we've talked about, different people group, but we have not yet talked about the African American community and how we can heal. And so I believe, when we talk about this trauma, again, stress and trauma is different. We say that, when the soldiers, they go out to war, they have post-traumatic stress, and we say they need these resources and things. Again, post-traumatic slave syndrome, it affects your mind, it affects you physically, it affects, when you sleep, it affects how you interact with other Black within, in the same community. It affects every part of our life. And not only it affecting our life, it is killing us. In the West End, in different parts of the country, right now we have the highest number of the COVID. We see that we're dying for diabetes, all these illnesses, Black people are dying. And so I really believe that we need to take responsibility and say, we have hurt these people and we need to heal as a group, not just like, I understand what Woody is saying, not to have these programs again, because these programs, I believe, is just putting Band-Aids on. It's putting Band-Aids and it's causing tension within our connection within the community. Because if you just say, okay, I'm gonna help these people in this zip code, but we're gonna wait to help these people, that is causing tension. And so we need to heal everybody. We need, because the CDC, they even say it. They say we need to change the narrative. We need to stop punishing people, and we need to help these people. And they say that our state representative policies, we can have change to happen. And so the mayor, he has declared us racism as a health crisis. And so we really need to take action, because it is about, we say we care about the kids, but again, Black families, they pass on this post-traumatic slave syndrome. And so we will, our kids, even though they didn't experience slavery themselves, they experience oppression in the thought patterns of the parents. And so we're passing this down to our children, generation. And so it's important that we heal so we can grow and we can start, changing the way we think towards each other. We can start building those business, start loving one another. And so I really believe it's very important, because it is really harming us.
Thank you for that. And next question is for Missy. And Missy, I'm interested in hearing about your process of getting involved with bail abolition, and particularly your work with the Louisville Community Bail Fund, how you got involved with the bail fund, and what it's like on a day-to-day basis to work on grassroots bailouts. Sorry, you're muted.
How I got connected with them was through my son 2 years ago, when he was incarcerated, and he was told that LCBF had resources to help young Black men who was looking for help to get bailed out. So when they had bailed him out, I was like, well, Lord, this must be my calling, because somebody bailed my child out. Now there's other people who needs to bail out. So he was told that the contact person name was Chanel Him. So I had to connect with her before they had bailed him out, because you have to have a support plan to bail out someone. And we worked on the support plan. We got it together. We bailed him out. So that's how I got hooked up with Louisville Community Bail Fund. And on a day-to-day basis, we have like so many people calling in, saying, were they incarcerated with their bonds and how much the bonds is. So we check on that, and we work on a support plan to bail someone, to get them bailed out, because you have to have a support plan for people. And my plan is for that is that's why I want to work with the ages of 12, 18 of the young Black men, to keep them out of the system, because like Whitney said, there is trauma. If you ain't lived through trauma, you not understanding what we all on this panel talking about. And from a kid on, we have been through things, and we have not been able to talk about it, because we just throw it up under the rug and keep it moving. So now when you get as an adult, we still having this trauma issues, and that's why a lot of things are going on in life with people, and they commit crimes, they doing things, and they not getting the help. So that's where we come through and trying to help these people, try to get them together, get them on the right path. And like I said, we do have to have responsibility, but if we ain't took care of the trauma, how can we hold responsibility? How could that happen? And so my plan is to get the safe house together, which would consist of counselors, therapists, live-in housekeeper, and to get them to where they start loving themselves. If we don't love ourselves, how can we go on day to day? So that's how I really got connected with LCBF, of the bailing out, because there was my child, my cousin, my brother, or whatever, that needed the help. So I just came in and was like, there's people that need help. We all need help. We fall short. In the West End, yes, we do have people out here committing crimes or whatever that is, or whatever, because they not dealing with the trauma. And it's not just in the West End, it's everywhere. But it's always directed towards African Americans.
Thank you for that. And the next question is for Shamika. And so Shamika, before I asked a question. I'm going to give some context about the Louisville Eviction Lab. And so the Louisville Eviction Lab, we believe that housing is a human right. And we believe that landlords profit from what should be a basic human right. And so we don't believe that landlords supply housing. We believe that landlords profit from housing. We don't believe that developers supply housing. We believe that developers profit from housing. And so early in the pandemic, we attempted to form a coalition with some local nonprofits and service providers to push for canceling rent. What we found was that the service providers were actually working with local government and all trade property management. So they were actively working with landlords to push for more rental assistance and landlord subsidies. And so my question is kind of two parts. We've even seen here in the chat that the Coalition for the Homeless is pushing for an extension of the eviction moratorium. We have this local narrative that the moratorium and rental assistance are effective. However, the data that we've produced in this session and our observations from eviction court are showing that they're not effective at all. And so my question, Shamika, is, do you believe that the push for rental assistance, which are subsidies to landlords, that the push for rental assistance and the moratorium are coming at the expense of a more radical political analysis around canceling rent? And why do you think that's happening?
Yeah, I believe that push for more rent and moratorium is just another way for landlords to get because you cancel rent and I've been hearing from people like are benefiting from everything, from holding the mortgage company bailed out. They're putting the principal at the back end of their, of the loan. So it's really heavy. Like the pushback for rent is really because I think the benefit in counseling rent. A lot of our council members are landlords. A lot of the people that are in
Shamika, you're breaking up. I don't know if anybody else could hear it, but I couldn't hear you very well. Can we put a pause on that question and maybe come back to it if your connection can get better?
Yeah.
And so we can go to Catrice's question. And Catrice, you talked a lot about the evictions that started happening in Beecher Terrace after the Choice Neighborhoods grant was announced. And so what I wanted to ask you is, what did you see in Beecher Terrace around the time the grant was announced? Did you see a change in the surveillance of the neighborhood, in the evictions of residents? What were your observations there?
Yes, I did witness, as I had mentioned in the video, I had noticed more people getting evicted, more families, households getting evicted, more for pettier reasons than eviction would ever occur. Like I had mentioned with the guy with the ID who had his girlfriend's address, was not on the lease there. They were evicted. That was something that had never happened, that I had never experienced, I even heard about in my 10 years of living there. I know this camera's been put up that Louisville Metro Housing Authority first tried to deny, and then came back and said that was part of Louisville Metro Police Department, which is a whole nother story. So yeah, I did notice a lot of more evictions, more frequently, been evicted, more so as the relocation actually started to unravel and start moving forward. Scary. It was very scary, and everyone was on edge. Like, you could just see it. Already been uncertain of how this whole thing worked, just knowing that they were on you, looking for any reason to evict you, to throw you out of the street, to save you from being paid change. Yeah, it was ridiculous. It was scary, very unsettling time.
Thank you for that. Let's come, Shamika, if you think your connection's better, we can come back to you and try it again.
Someone suggests turning off your camera so that your audio might work better if you turn off your camera. Thanks for that suggestion.
Okay, can y'all hear me? I changed locations. I was in the corner. Is that better?
A little bit, but if you could try turning off your camera, I think we'll hear you more clear. That was so clear. Did anybody else feel that difference?
Yeah,
I'm alone.
All right. Can you hear me now? Okay. All right, Josh. The question again, please.
Do you feel like the push for the moratorium and the rental assistance is coming at the expense of canceling rent? And why do you think that might be?
Oh, yes. I definitely do think that it's coming at the expense of cancel rent, because if they cancel rent, then they won't get paid. Or at least they feel like they won't. They've been paid several times. They're the only ones getting bailed out in the situation, and as the impacted resident tenant, we're the only ones that's sitting on pins and needles wondering what's going to happen next. So it damn well does benefit them to not cancel rent and push for more moratorium, then that pushes for more money to go into their pocket. So it's sad to say, but a lot of people that are sitting up here making these decisions are landlords. That's why you see people like All Trade that's going to be Build Back Better organization. They're only trying to build back better for them. That's why I wouldn't sit in that meeting anymore, because it was very, very, as an impacted resident, to hear what you're really trying to build back better, and then you want to pull somebody like me in to, kind of pacify or see what we're doing. It really just pisses me off, because you're really not doing anything to benefit the residents, the tenants, the ones that are really impacted. So, yeah, it's really sad. The Apartment Association, I'm pretty sure they have a great big hand in on pushing for another moratorium, pushing for more CARE Act money and all that stuff, so that they can get more of the money from the city. Louisville Metro Housing Authority, they're all hoorah, they're going to get their $50,000 out of there too. So the only people still sitting here waiting is the tenants with their hand out, like, where's our money? Where's our reparations? We're the only ones being pushed, and a lot of the people who are owning a lot of this property and are benefiting from these moratoriums and monies are out-of-town investors. They don't even live here. They don't even walk on the grounds that they're getting the money for. So what do we care about the tenants?
And so that was a little choppy, but I was able to hear most of what you said. And so thank you for that. I want to open it up now to questions from the attendees, but also to the community researchers. If you all have anything you want to add about your projects that maybe didn't get discussed in the Q&A or even in your presentation, feel free to chime in with that right now. We don't have any questions from the attendees at the moment. And so if we don't have any other questions, I'm going to make some closing remarks. Jessica, I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to say, but I want to add that Jessica and I started thinking about what the Root Cause Research Center could be in 2019. And we came up with the idea of a community research incubator really based around our belief that academics and institutions shouldn't control the means of production for knowledge and data. And we've came up and we've built it out, over this concept with solidarity research, based around this idea that there's a huge disconnect, not just in Louisville, but everywhere. But I think it's particularly egregious in Louisville, that there's a huge disconnect between what people experience every day and the narratives that get told in the community. And so what would it mean if impacted people, poor people, working class people, Black people could produce their own research projects and lift up and acknowledge the notion that local government lies, that developers lie, that nonprofits that get money from developers and local government lie, and participate in research with that. And so we started with some principles, and some of the principles we worked with were it's okay to be emotional in research. It's okay to not be articulate all the time. And so we really were trying to just dissolve this sort of academic credentialing that keeps truth from being told, and to produce counter narratives. And so, critical to that were the, traditions of visibility, recognition, representation. And so we created these concepts, but we really didn't know what that would be, right? And so it's one thing to create a concept, it's one thing to create a program, but you guys stepped in and actually brought that to life. And I just can't say enough about how inspired we are by the work that you guys did over this year. We had no idea that we would be in the middle of a global pandemic. We had no idea that we would be in the middle of a national uprising. And just that the way we showed up and engaged in this work has been incredible. And so what we saw today were basically a synopsis of much larger projects. And like Jessica said, we're going to put those out tomorrow on the website. Make sure everyone checks out the videos, the papers, the story maps that are being created. The Louisville Eviction Lab has created an entire story map, and I believe for the first time is releasing Louisville's eviction data. And unlike academics, we name names in this research, which we think is important. And so thank you all for your support. If anyone wants to support the researchers, please get in touch with us. Everyone receives stipends for this work, but it wasn't enough, of course. And so anything you all want to do to support that work, please do so. We really want to thank, once again, Metro United Way, Park Community Credit Union, the Resist Foundation, Taunt, Rhythm Science Sound, Curtis Creative, and also want to thank some folks on the West Coast like Dr. Ananya Roy at UCLA, who've really supported and inspired our work. And I'm sure I'm missing a whole lot of people in this, but I wanted to thank some people while I was thinking about it. And so with that, I want to open it up if anybody else has any closing remarks.
Cancel rent. Sorry, that's it.
And look at this book. I want to say everybody can look at this book. This will help you understand post-traumatic slave syndrome. And I just love this book also about Dr. King's writings, but it just explains the deep impact of African Americans. And I just love
the question in the chat about the deep impact. If you'd like to ask what are the next steps and on these systems to create the systematic change we are looking for. There's some pushback. But what are we gonna do? We're gonna flip the damn table. We ain't gonna stop. Flip the table.
And so if no one else has anything else to add, thanks everybody. This was the first community research incubator, and so we are hoping to do it again next year. And I think next year we're going to center it around abolition research and focus on researching policing, not just in Louisville, but we're going to extend our geography to the whole state of Kentucky.
Thank you.
Let me, Josh, I want to say something. I just want to thank all our panelists on here. It was a long 6 months, and we had to encourage each other to make it to where we are today. And the ones that came in and listened to us and everything, please support all 7 of us. Some of us need houses to help people. Some need help of the racial gap. Some need help for counseling the rent. Come on in. You see what we have done 6 months. This is not a game. This is personal to us. So please, please, please support us in any way you can. And thank you, Josh and Jessica, for working with us. I know Dave, we probably was rough and tough to y'all, but we just want to thank y'all.
Thank you, thank you,
Thank you.
Thank you all. Yes.
Everything that Missy said. Everything that Missy said times 10. She said it all for everybody. I'm just gonna throw in C's and Jared. Thank you again for all of your help. I appreciate it. And like she said, it's not a game and we didn't choose. I think one of the questions was, how was the topics chosen? And I put it in the chat, but I'm just gonna say it. It's not like academic, like Josh said, academic research where you're in high school, you're in college, and somebody says, just do this paper. Like you don't have a choice, right? The teacher told you what to do. You have to pull some resources and you have to make it work, make it fit for whatever it needs to fit for a grade. This is not a grade, this is a life, right? Like you're not trying to pass a class, we're trying to like progress life. And I don't think anybody chose a topic because it was random. It's because it's a life experience for us all, and everything that we're talking about is in real time. So we need real action for real time. So thank you.
Well, thank you all so much. I am filled up from the presentations today. So with that, we will close it out.
All right, thank y'all so much. Have a great day. Have a great weekend. Rest up. Drink water. Eat good food. Be with friends, family, anybody. Stop in the street.